Rewind the Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads, and if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show, and if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
And welcome, everybody, to another edition of Rewind to Dynamite. It's John Pollock and Wai Ting coming at you on this Wednesday night, October the 23rd. How are you, Wai?
Doing okay, John. How about yourself?
I was doing fine, and then around 3 o'clock p.m. hit, and it's been a very crazy number of hours, and we're going to be diving into that. Obviously, the big story today is the lawsuit filed on behalf of 5 anonymous ring boys, and the person we are bringing on right off the top, you know him from his work at Between the Sheets with Chris Zellner, and he's got an excellent feature going through all of the 82 pages that were filed today up on Rolling Stone's website. He is David Bixenspan, who joins us. And David, I am sure as crazy as my day was, yours was that much more insane in terms of the lead up to this and then the actual lawsuit being filed today.
Yeah, I mean, some of that is for reasons that we're not going to get into as well. But yeah, it was an interesting day. We had there was a miscommunication on the side of the law firm and their PR people, which led to them, putting out their announcement before our story dropped. Because obviously, you can tell we had access to the complaint, early. But it didn't really ruin our scoop, so to speak, because no one had time to read the 80-page lawsuit really before then. But yeah, it's been an interesting day, for the most part. I've been getting, hearing good things from most people who are, sane and rational.
Yeah, the sane population is always the people to focus on during these types of stories. Just taking like a step back, and we'll get into a lot of the specifics and what's outlined, but for someone that has been covering this like as closer than anyone over this last decade, this story, just your thought about just getting to this day where this suit was filed and you had, 5 ring boys attaching themselves to this lawsuit. I mean, did you think for a time like you would ever even see this day come where this would be such a major development in a decades long scandal going back to just another era in this industry?
I would say not until after Janelle Grant filed her lawsuit. It felt for a while like even if you made an effort, it was hard to get people to care. Rolling Stone did run a sample chapter from Josie Reisman's book about the ring boy, the Vince McMahon book, but this chapter about the ring boy stuff. There was that, but like when I did my Business Insider article 4 years ago, which people can go back to the archives and check out the show we did together when that came out. I don't know if it was the specific nature of their paywall. I don't know if it's that their headline was, let's just say, not exactly search engine optimized, but that didn't really get that much attention in the way we thought it would. And that just, I put a lot of time into that. And, it became something that, like, if people were going to talk about this, they were going to point to that article. But it just, could also be pandemic stuff too. I don't know. But like that, there was that. And then just subsequently, like, just it just never felt like it clicked. It was clicking the right way with people. I think some of that, is also, as Chris and I talked about when we did the Titan Gate shows, like, I think a lot of it is people having a greater discomfort talking about this topic when it involves boys as the victims. I think that's a factor too. But then I started either just getting a feeling and then eventually hearing rumblings, after the Grant lawsuit was filed. Lee Cole had, the one ring boy on his YouTube show too earlier this year. You got, even though it's not the same thing, you and Brandon had Nick Kiniski on to talk about Terry Garvin. So as that was coming out, it's sort of, yes, like then I started to kind of get a feeling that there might be something coming. I don't know if I could have imagined a law firm as big and with as much on-point experience being behind a lawsuit like this, though. Because, for those who, haven't done their research on it, which is understandable, but it's probably most people, and I don't think we ended up getting into this in the article, and this is probably actually a bigger story for Canadians than Americans. Greg Gutzler, who's, running point on this for DeSello Levitt, the law firm, he was the lead attorney on a lot of the victim lawsuits against Peter Nygaard.
Yeah.
Who, what's the best way to describe him? Like a Epstein meets Diddy kind of figure who was like the head of like a Canadian fashion mogul, right?
Yeah. It just like decades of this stuff that came to light, and you can go down a rabbit hole of just like how it's a factor that I throw out to you, David, in that you have two factors, I think, working for this. Number one is the fact that Linda McMahon being attached to this, that is going to catch some attention. And number two is just the propensity of sex trafficking cases that are currently ongoing with high-profile figures from like P. Diddy to Mike Jeffries this week. It just seems like there is a certain attention at the moment to a lot of this kind of patterned abuse of these scandals that I am curious to see, because like you and I are just so in the weeds on this. Like this is just horrifying stuff that I can't imagine that people would be able to just dismiss the like to read this complaint is shocking, and I don't say that lightly.
Yeah, and I mean, there's stuff in there that is. Some of it's not surprising if you're familiar with the history. Some of it is, because based on what we knew up to this point, Mel, because I don't think we've even gotten into those specifics yet. For those who don't have any familiarity with this, the very short version is that Mel Phillips, who was one of the ring crew chiefs and also a ring announcer for many years, from basically the mid-'70s through early 1992, had been accused of molesting boys and related foot fetish stuff that often certainly by WWE, ended up being used sometimes to try to kind of cloud the issue, and kind of, Jerry McDevitt saying to me, kind of like trying to frame it like, oh, he just played with their feet. He didn't, that it didn't go beyond that. When that's never what was alleged in the first place. It was always
what was the
alleged
line he gave
serious.
you in Business Insider? What was the description?
That it was not like more conventional forms of sexual abuse, such as such as rape, sodomy, etc. I believe.
Yes. Which
was just, yeah, I don't even know how to describe it, but
that was a puzzling statement to say the least.
But where I was going with that, though, just because we hadn't really talked about who Mel Phillips is, based on what we knew about, it seemed like his MO was to go after kids from broken homes, kids that showed up at WWE shows. He could tell they didn't really have parental supervision, and it went from there. Which, I would think is a fairly common MO among child predators. It turns out it wasn't just that. There are two of the 5 John Does in this lawsuit who say that he just showed up in their Philadelphia neighborhood. He lived in Philadelphia at the in the 80s, and he was the guy who was in charge of taking the props everywhere at the time, like the title belts and Iron Sheik's Persian clubs. And there are pictures in the complaint of the kids with the stuff. There's one photo with Mel just barely out of frame, watching everything, and it's creepy, and it really hits home. Like, I mean, I can tell you, when I talked to the confidential witness that's mentioned in the complaint, who lived on the block where some of those kids lived, like hearing her talk about it, and also at the same time, looking over those photos, like it really just hammered everything home. But especially this other wrinkle now where it's like, okay, it's one thing that maybe, it seems like they knew about this, that, now we're finding out again, we're hearing again, that he had private locker rooms at some arenas, which had been brought up once before, but not a lot. And now it's like, he also had at a time where before even toy belts, he could show off the championship belts to these kids.
Yeah, that was an aspect I did not understand. Like, I knew this was going to be dark, and when you see these patterns emerge, and you see this in the Bill Cosby case, it's like these predators have a formula of what is sort of their MO, as you put it. And Mel Phillips would literally drive into these neighborhoods like this guy was on the prowl, and famously has this black book of kids in all of the different towns that he is overseeing. Like, I know you and Chris mentioned this, like, God knows the depth that this goes into. Like, there's a mention in this complaint. This is the tip of the iceberg. And like, I can't fathom that we last heard of Mel Phillips in 1992. He lived for another 20 years, and you can't convince me that this guy just kind of had this enlightened moment when he was done in the WWF. And we're talking like the digital online age that he was at least alive for until 2012. Like, I don't know how deep this could go, but you certainly get with the five John Does in this complaint and the description. And yeah, broken homes. We're talking like 13 to 15-year-old boys, and just completely in awe of being brought into this kind of secret society of professional wrestling, and Mel Phillips was their gateway.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which part of that to even start with.
Sorry, I threw a lot out there.
Yeah, I mean, where do you want me to pick that up?
I mean, let's kind of just rewind here, because for some people that might just be tuning in and don't even know kind of the specifics of this case, this was filed today in Baltimore County Circuit Court. It was 5 anonymous former WWF ring boys, and the defendants include Vince and Linda McMahon, as well as TKO/WWE. The focus that a lot of people are going to have is the culpability and responsibility of Vince and Linda McMahon. And what is outlined in the case, David, that you learned in your reporting out of this case beyond what was known previously? Like, there has always been, I mean, you have pointed out the 1988 removal of Mel Phillips, but what else has been outlined in this case that places Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon as the two key defendants?
I mean, I'm trying to think, is there anything like, I don't think there's anything necessarily revelatory in the complaint as far as what ties them to it. It's just, it's putting a lot of it in one place. There are some new things that kind of make you go, like, we didn't really have a spot for it in the article, but there is a note in the complaint that I think it's upon information and belief, the lawyer phrasing for something like this, that Phillips got a $300,000 severance. And remember, that's in 1992 money when he got fired, which is hefty. And it jibes with rumors that I had heard over the years. That I think does jump out a little bit. I mean, as far as them knowing, the private locker room thing, realizing that was a pattern, because the only other time that had ever come up was in the lawsuit that was filed in 99 by one of the ring boys, which no one knew about for almost 2 decades. Huffington Post found it after Linda was announced for Trump's cabinet in late 2016. His lawyer mentioned that there, but it was, and I certainly found it credible. It was the only time I'd ever heard it. And now you have, multiple other ring boys saying the same thing. And it certainly makes you wonder, like, at a time when only Hulk Hogan had a private locker room, which is, I mean, that's well documented, like Bret Hart talks about that in his book, that the tradition had been that the champion got a private locker room, and it was mentioned to him that he could have it, but he said he didn't want to, preferred to change with the boys. It's an established thing. the private locker room for the champion in that era of the WWF. You know, before Hogan, who even knows? I would doubt that Bruto or Backlund or anyone like that had a private locker room. So it definitely makes you wonder how and why would this guy have a private locker room, period. You know, unless someone over his head is giving him a private locker room, and why would the ring crew head who doubles as ring announcer need a private locker room?
David, I'm curious. The fact that Rolling Stone is interested in this story, how much of this do you think has to do with the Mr. McMahon documentary's release on Netflix?
I don't know. I just knew. I'm just gonna be honest about it. Once it came to me, like, I knew Rolling Stone was someplace I had a good shot of landing it at. I knew Rolling Stone would be a good place for it, period, based on a lot of the reporting they've done in recent years, and it's visible and has a long legacy and credibility. And so I pitched it, and they were interested, and you know, they did. I don't know if there was any editor overlap, but like I said, they did run that, you know, that book excerpt to 2 years. What was it? Last year or 2 years ago? Whatever it was. So it didn't surprise me they were interested, but I'm sure the documentary helped. Like, and I mean, I can tell you, like, I know at least one person involved in the lawsuit came forward because of the documentary.
Oh, that's very interesting. And I think there is something to sort of these like floodgates being opened, and I think that was the case with Nick Kiniski, of just hearing other people talking about this, and he kind of felt compelled to finally talk about this. And you know, you heard someone that was, you know, very clearly, you know, trying to, you know, just share what they went through. And you know, Nick Kiniski was somebody that just kind of like completely removed from professional wrestling and was just like barely even having any attachment to it all these years later. And I think it's just sometimes there is that power in numbers, and seeing, you know, what other people have gone through, it does enlist others to maybe come forward too.
Yeah, and also it you know, it reopens the wound, but in some cases that's gonna push people to want to do something about it, and whether it's, you know, a family member or the victim themselves, whatever, that it's like, hey, you know, look, there might be more interest. I might be better off if I'm, you know, one of them, yeah, or more able to get a lawyer or whatever under these circumstances with the additional tension, with the documentary and all that. So yeah, I mean, I certainly think that's a factor. One thing I did want to, just because I just remembered, circle back to real quick, as far as the McMahons, and at least certainly the office knowing, one of the John Does does allege that Pat Patterson witnessed some of the abuse in the locker room. If I remember right, I think the inference was more not necessarily parts that were overtly sexual, but the Phillips kind of aggressively wrestling the boys and like wrenching their feet and toes stuff. So that at least one instance of that, and probably more, I forget exactly how it's phrased.
Yeah, this was John Doe number 4. Speaking about, kind of in front of other wrestlers, including Pat Patterson, that he would be, like aggressively wrestling these boys. I try to put this into like the perspective of somebody that is reading this cold, and I think a lot of people are just going to come to one conclusion of why there were these underage kids that were involved in these roles. They're crossing state lines, and it seemed that there was absolutely no measures in place of anybody, that just nothing struck a nerve, that everyone was just aware of this guy, and it was just, this was how this guy operated, and it was, just ignoring what was obviously a guy that didn't even seem to have any kind of hesitance to show this like out in public. Like, this was not somebody like necessarily putting on this mask, and no one could believe that this guy, like, this is the opposite. You learn about this, and seems like completely natural that this guy was doing a whole lot worse than what he was doing in broad daylight in front of the locker room. That it's this closed community that is no one is going to snitch on one another or make a stink out of anything. And that was the talent and the company policing itself. And this is just a very ugly picture that is painted when that is the lack of protocol in place.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can say is, we didn't really have a spot for this in the article, but something I think I've talked about on shows with you before is that
might have just lost David there.
Okay, well we will try and reconnect with David Bixenspan in a minute.
Call us back, David. Please.
How much of this have you gotten to go through in the last couple of hours since it was filed, Wai?
David's article, Brandon's articles. So just reading there. I haven't dug into the 82-page lawsuit in that time. I think we got David Bixenspan.
Yes, I clicked the wrong button. Sorry. Where was I? So that from when Phil Mushnick gave me access to the documents he had, it included a summary of interviews that his lawyers did when WWE and Vince McMahon sued him for defamation for covering all this. And I made sure to ask him, like, hey, can I use this, because it was a privileged defense document at the time, but he said, yeah, you can absolutely use it. And it included an interview with Jim Stewart, who was Vince's driver, and he said that what led to Phillips getting fired in '88 was that a bunch of wrestlers, feeling he would be the one who might be able to sway Vince, started coming to him about doing something to get rid of Phillips. So it's not like there was nothing, but obviously then if you're one of those wrestlers who did that, you see Phillips get fired and then you see him get rehired like 6 weeks later.
Yeah, there's like the other side of the coin is that he's gone for 6 weeks. Like, it blows my mind that Vince McMahon brings him back. Like, this is a very expendable person. So let's get into that. In terms of like job duties and stuff, of the three guys that were involved in named in the different sexual misconduct scandals in '92, the Ring Boys, and then the casting couch stuff. Pat Patterson, wrestling genius, who was probably responsible for more of this company's success creatively than he'll ever get credit for. So to Vince, one of the least disposable people skill wise that works for him. Terry Garvin, more middle management, but experienced middle management that actually enjoyed doing like middle management busy work. So and a very key ally with Pat Patterson.
Yes, they were childhood friends. Yeah, like they grew up in the same neighborhood. Mel Phillips was at best, maybe slightly below average ring announcer. Most of the time, I would say an outright bad ring announcer who ran one of the ring crews. Like, he was expendable in every way other than that they clearly had trust in him, and he probably knew where various bodies were proverbial bodies were buried. So just they could have gotten rid of him and the company probably would have just continued without missing a beat, but they didn't. And and then Patterson, according to Jim Stewart, was who went to Vince saying, well, what if we bring him back, but we say that he has to stay away from kids? Which, okay, great.
And this comes to light, this caution to Mel Phillips when he is brought back to steer clear of kids. And it repeatedly blows my mind that Vince McMahon discloses this to both Phil Mushnick and Dave Meltzer. And then second is the lawsuit that they file against the New York Post and Phil Mushnick. And in the sworn deposition by Phil Mushnick is stating, again, this is a sworn deposition, that Vince McMahon had told plenty to Phil Mushnick. And again, this was a suit that goes nowhere. But what comes out of that is just, the amount of communication that Mushnick had with Vince McMahon that certainly leads a lot of Vince McMahon being fully aware of what was going on, and by no means being out of the loop on what was going on here. And like, this is disclosed by Vince McMahon.
Yes, and we should make something very clear too, because as we've said every time we brought this up, it's just bizarre that everyone just kind of forgot about this for almost 30 years. It's very strange. But even though they sued the Post and Mushnick for defamation, even though they cite things in that specific article as defamatory, not once, ever, have they pointed to the description of that call as defamatory. Never.
Which would be the number one, like, that is the smoking gun for a lot of people. And if that is not being disputed, I mean, it leaves you to draw your own conclusion that, like, that to me, it's the most damning line that is in that article that is attached to Vince McMahon, the knowledge of what was going on with Mel Phillips and even letting him go at a period for 6 weeks.
Yeah, and we should know too, like, we sent, it was the same. We sent the same questions to everyone, but TKO, WWE, Vince McMahon. We didn't actually have an individual contact for Linda McMahon, so we sent it to the Trump PAC that she runs. We sent very specific questions, including about this. Vince McMahon, through his PR people and his lawyer, was the only one to respond, and just blamed Phil Mushnick while completely sidestepping the questions about how, like, yeah, you sued him, but you didn't say that this was made up. It just completely dodged it, and I don't know, like, because especially it's not like these people are above lying, so you do wonder about why they don't even bother to accuse Phil of making it. And I'm guessing they worry about, I guess, getting sued back by Phil for defamation. That's the only thing I can think of. And I guess Dave Meltzer too. That's the only thing I think of. But like, they have never once denied that he said that. Like, just never. Like, you can read the complaint from the lawsuit. And I've never published the whole deposition because there's a lot of stuff in there that is sensitive in terms of people's names and victims' names that's in there. But like, even in the deposition where we get the more detailed version where Phil says that also Linda was kind of involved in all that in bringing Phillips back. And like, it's the least hostile part of the whole deposition in terms of how Jerry McDevitt was questioning Phil.
I do want to make I do want to speak about the tape that WWF had possession of, and also what you learned through the Freedom of Information Act request, where we do get the kind of FBI involvement in this particular tape. Can you explain that aspect of the complaint as well?
Yes. So this is another one of those things that was partially known, but a lot of it was buried to history. And then it took me, getting some of the records from the Mushnick lawsuit, and then also filing a few FOIA requests to really figure out exactly what happened. So that there was some kind of videotape showing Mel Phillips and Ring Boys doing something that was known. That did become a little bit of a news story in 1993. Weirdly enough, planted by WWE. And I am not going to explain who Marty Bergman is here. Just Google his name with WWE. That would take way too long. But he was basically, he's been referred to as their fixer in that era. Basically planted this story with the idea being that NBC News, who was trying to get a hold of a copy of this video, planting it with the New York Observer to frame it like, oh, is NBC News going to have another exploding truck story? Because this was on the heels of when Dateline did a story about, what was it, Toyota? I forget which manufacturer it was, but about some brand of trucks being prone to exploding, which turned out to be pretty fabricated. It's a weird story. My Substack post that's linked in the Rolling Stone article gets into all this. But that's all that anyone ever really knew. And then, eventually I get, the stuff from the lawsuit, and it's like, it basically just kind of dovetails with the stuff in the New York Observer article that there was this guy, John Maloof, who I forget if it's the Observer article or the lawsuit stuff or both, but at the time referred to Maloof as a former WWF employee. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but that's how it was always characterized in all of that stuff. He had shot this video before a show, and it's Mel Phillips and Ring Boys in the ring, and I think the word cavorting might have been used in one description, and that's all anyone really knew for a long time. At some point I filed a FOIA request for the FBI's file on WWE and all of the whole grand, the Ring Boy steroid, etc. investigation. And there was stuff, there were these memos about how they got the video and sent it to the Behavioral Sciences Unit of the FBI, and it was pretty heavily redacted, and the BSU concluded that because it was in a public setting and there were too many alternate explanations, that it wasn't compelling evidence. But I filed a new request to reprocess the memos, like, here's additional proof of death, etc. Send me these as best you can. And it uncovered more of the memos. And I got that 3 years ago. And it revealed that the tape actually showed the Phillips doing... how descriptive should I be right now?
Well, I think we should get into the description. Of course, we want to give people fair warning. But as you and I has talked about, I think it is important to convey what is actually being alleged here.
Yeah, it's the scene in Spotlight where Sasha Pfeiffer is talking to one of the victims and it's like, look, we can't just say molested. It's like, I know it's tough, but we need to be descriptive. Molested is this cold clinical term, and people aren't going to give it the proper weight. So what the video actually showed was what most of the Ring Boys who had come forward so far had accused Phillips of doing, which was, wrestling them, kind of forcefully taking their feet and putting it against his crotch. And that's what was on the video. It is clearly described in the FBI memo, the first FBI memo when they're sending the tape to the BSU, that's what was happening. And look, maybe the FBI couldn't make a federal case, it's possible. Why they wouldn't have necessarily tried to punt it back to local police somewhere, I don't know. But here's the thing with that though, and this is honestly something I did not put together until recent days working on this story. Because I paid closer attention to the dates on the letters between WWE and their representatives like Jerry McDevitt and John Maloof. The day that they returned the original of the WWE returned the original of the video to John Maloof was the day they sued Mushnick in the Post, and says the video that he had sent them the video last year. So at some point in 1992. Months before they sued Phil Mushnick in the New York Post, saying that the whole Ring Boy sex abuse scandal was basically fabricated. They had a video showing Mel Phillips doing exactly what the Ring Boys who had come forward had accused him of in the ring before a WWE show.
This is such a stronger case than what was brought forward with the steroid distribution charges. This to me was... when you put all of this together, it just seems like the FBI identified 10 victims. God knows how many others there were, but it just seemed like this was just rife for a federal investigation, and they dodged the ultimate bullet with this story.
Who knows exactly why the feds did what they did? How much of it was feeling a need to try to get Vince? Because, look, at one point I think it's before they got the video, or actually no, I think it's mentioned in the BSU memos too. So I think it was actually after too. They were trying to get a hold of Phillips to see if he'd turn on Vince and give him immunity, which makes my head spin. I don't get it. I think some of it is, I think they just punted because look at how badly they handled the Larry Nassar stuff and decades later. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, this is a thing that happens with them. So whether it's, I think regardless of what the FBI reasons were, I think the foot fetish angle helped, in a weird way, give WWE and Phillips cover for years, because especially since as Tom Cole got more vocal in later years, he was less descriptive of what happened. For a lot of people, a long time,
people minimalized it. They just minimalized it as like this goofy quirk that this guy had. Oh, he played with feet. Like it was like it
was messed up, but it didn't, like, people thought, okay, maybe he didn't do anything criminal.
It was enough for people that did not want this to be some, horrible, just cast this shade over top of this industry that they love, that they could just explain away as being something a lot more innocent than people wanted to really believe it was. And I think it really, you have Linda McMahon on camera just like laughing about this on that one news report about a foot fetish. Like this is not anything to be taken seriously. It's just an odd quirk, was sort of their defense of it.
Well, we don't have her actual comments in that segment. That whole thing is relayed by the reporter in narration. But yeah, like she said, like the way it's relayed is like, oh yes, Mel Phillips had a foot fetish, but it was something everyone joked about, and it got blown out of proportion. Like, okay, and then like it's referenced some in the complaint, like. There are good reasons that Linda is mentioned here. We should be clear. Like, you have Mushnick saying that Vince said that she was also involved with bringing Phillips back. You have her whole role with all the Tom Cole stuff and, trying to be the mom figure to him. And then firing him with this really cruel letter that I believe is linked in my Business Insider article. And then just in the weirdest twist, trying to mess with his unemployment, personally attending one of the unemployment hearings. Like, Linda is not being thrown in here because she's visible as part of the Trump team.
No, like, and that's going to be a lot of people's defense of this, and that really is not the case when you look into, like Linda McMahon was, just like this was 1A and 1B running this company, and in particular, like Linda was in the thick of things at this time. Like nothing was happening without both of their knowledge in all of this. But I'm sure that is going to be the argument, that Linda McMahon is simply being ostracized here because of her current role. And I mean, the WWE TKO side is going to, I think, respond to this in the exact same way as they did the Janelle Grant case and distance themselves. And I don't know if there will be really any response from WWE or TKO unless they are put in a position where they have to answer for this. And I think they're going to just simply listen. That was another time period. We are monitoring today, and this would never fly today.
And the thing with that is, if they want to come out of this the best way possible for the company, the way ahead is like, look, something terrible was done to these guys. We don't want to fight them on this, and just publicly settle and be like, look, nobody involved, not even the McMahons, are part of this company anymore. And just draw that clear line and just be like, look, these people deserve to be heard. Do I think they're going to do that? No. But
it is not the next step you expect, David, whether it's through an Ann Callis or somebody else, to challenge them that these are, in theory, NDAs that WWE would be able to release people from.
I mean, look, the article mentioned, actually, wait, I'm not sure if the article mentions one, but it's in the complaint, citing my Business Insider reporting, the ring boy who sued in 99. And then, it was dropped with a, joint request for dismissal with prejudice. When I reached out to him 4 years ago, he outright told me he had a non-disclosure agreement.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard from one person who indicated this that an NDA exists. Like I have no doubt that there are. I would speculate that there's plenty of them out there.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has always kind of assumed that that Chris Lose, who was the other ring boy who came forward at the same time as Tom Cole, had one because Mike Sawyer, who used to write for various wrestling websites, knew him and was like, one day he just after he stopped responding to people about the ring boy stuff, he showed up with this expensive car. Who knows? But I've assumed, and look, and the Coles admitted that when they were briefly aligned with WWE, they did somewhat willingly. I shouldn't say the Coles because it was what led to Tom Cole, the original whistleblower victim, and his older brother Lee. One of the things that led to their falling out was that Tom basically used the code to get into Lee's answering machine, and they got some ring boy names off of it. And
that was with Linda, I believe, as it's outlined.
Yeah, that sounds right. And yeah, that's a picture of Tom there. Which, yeah, should I get into the story of what the deal with that photo is, real quick?
Sure. Why don't you explain?
Okay. This is from an early 1999 issue of WWE's Raw magazine.
Oh yeah, right.
It's as you can kind of guess, since it shows the machines, it was a nostalgia thing they had started doing in the magazines. And someone was clearly not up to speed on what they should and shouldn't be selecting, because there's Tom Cole, and again, look at how young he clearly is and looks there, and he's just inside the guardrail leaning on the apron.
Yeah.
I had no idea this was a thing until 5 years ago when I was working on some of this stuff. I ended up in touch with Tom, through Lee, and how do I put this? At the time they weren't necessarily on the record, but now, after Tom's death, then, with Lee's blessing, it's different. Tom told me about how, for those who don't know, Tom always stayed a wrestling fan. Mm-hmm. One day he's just in Manhattan. He goes to a newsstand, picks up that Raw magazine. He's looking through it, and he sees that photo, and he had a PTSD flashback and a panic attack for the first time.
Wow.
And he called. He said he called up WWE right after, and I certainly believe that, because after the next issue, which was probably already about to go to press, they got rid of that nostalgia feature. So that's where that photo comes from.
Well, Bix, we will wrap this up because I feel that we are only scratching the surface of where this is going to be going, and I'm sure we're going to be having you back on at some point to go through this.
Yeah, if we even want to do something next week, whatever. Yeah, because I don't want to take too much more time away from, regularly scheduled programming. But it's important that we talk about this tonight.
Oh, this is a much bigger story than anything wrestling wise. But a great job on the Rolling Stone feature, and really for keeping such a spotlight on this. I think for those that have not read your Business Insider piece, I mean that's a feature I reread all the time. Say nothing of the Between the Sheets 4-part Titan Gate series that you and Chris Zellner did, which is really the Bible of this story. If you want to understand who all these people were, the roles that they held, what was alleged, and looking at the coverage from 30 years ago and contrasting, it's this is a very, very difficult story to navigate because there's just, you can really get into the weeds, but I always recommend people go listen to this because I think it's the most in-depth breaking down of this entire story, and this is the latest chapter attached to it all these years later.
Yeah, thank you. And we did these, 2.5 years ago when it was the 30th anniversary of everything. We did them initially on the Patreon, just because that's where we do our single topic deep dives. And then, like, when the Janelle Grant lawsuit was filed, Chris and I were like, you know what? We want to be able to point people to these shows. We want people to learn from them. We also don't want to feel like we're begging people for money all of a sudden off of this awful lawsuit. So we just decided we're making all 4 of these free. They're up. If you go to the Patreon, they have their own collection. They're easy to find. You don't need to sign up. They're just there. But they're also on our regular show, free feed as well, for people who want to go back to January and listen to them there through the regular feed that's on iTunes and everything. It also came about because we did do we did the week where Patterson, Garvin, and Phillips resigned, and that kind of led to it. So we skipped that week when we did the Patreon shows, but it explains it in the descriptions that people should go back and listen to that too. So yeah, I would appreciate, people check that out. There's definitely a lot to learn there. I mean, we learned stuff, even like as we were doing the shows, like early in, I think the first episode, we're going through stuff and there's a description in 3 count of, I think it was Ron Lemieux seeing an underage ring boy at a recent house show in Florida. And we figured out what show it was. And it was like, oh my God, they were still using underage ring boys after the San Diego Union Tribune reached out to them about the story that broke everything. So, like, it's just when you line all this stuff up in order, when you go over it with fresh eyes, like, you see stuff that's you're not necessarily going to notice otherwise. I mean, God, like I just said earlier, like, I've had those documents now for years, and including the FBI. Like, if we even just the FBI memos, it's 3 years. I've had the other stuff for longer. And again, it didn't even hit me until last week. Oh, wait, they had that tape before they even sued Mushnick. So it's like, it's very weedy. There's a lot to try to understand, and like putting it in order like that, it really helps. So yeah, I appreciate the compliments. I appreciate you having me on. Hopefully this brings the attention this is always deserved and that it's never really gotten. And hopefully that continues.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, David, for joining us. We'll be chatting soon, and we appreciate you breaking this down. And do go check out his story up at rollingstone.com. It's really in-depth. It's a really dark read, but everyone needs to be, I think, following the story and understanding what is going on. So thanks again, David, for the time.
Thanks for having me.
All right. On that note, and I will mention that Brendan Thurston as well put up a story up on our site, and you can go through that as well. Brandon and I are going to be doing a bonus edition of Pollock and Thurston on Thursday at noon Eastern time. We are hoping to be joined by several guests. One guest that will be joining us is Lee Cole, the brother of Tom Cole. So he will be on with us, and Brandon and I will also be discussing this further. So you can tune into that Thursday at noon Eastern time for a bonus edition of Pollock and Thurston. Wait, we have gone lengthy here, so we are going to jump into Dynamite tonight. What a transition. At the Maverick Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. WrestleTix reporting 2,540 tickets distributed, and we're getting right into things with the BCC's Carnage being recapped, and Jon Moxley is out in the desert ranting about caterpillars and caterpillars eating themselves, and he's going to destroy a little piece of someone tonight, always for the greater good. And then the BCC pickup truck came by, and they began their very long journey to the Maverick Center, and we're going to make it there just in time. Or were they? Was Jon Moxley already incognito backstage?
I guess he was.
I guess so. Mm-hmm. And then we go to our first of a dozen shots of the AEW babyfaces surrounding the Maverick Center, waiting for the BCC to arrive. And these goofs waited all night long for these guys to show up, and they got outsmarted. I didn't think you could make these guys look more foolish than this particular group.
Yeah, anytime you pull a group of baby faces together to defend the promotion, if they don't include top level guys, they can't help but feel like they're just, a random group of like jobbers. But that's exactly what this is. We're still at the stages of this feud where we have to build up the threat of the BCC or whatever they're being called right now. And I think you need these sort of undercard guys to look bad. So, these guys are cast in that role, and it's the type of role they have to play.
Yeah, it was very menacing. All these baby faces, and they're ready to throw down Karen Jarrett as well in her power suit.
Well, the more bodies, the better, right?
They were ready. Then we had quite the editing job of last week's Christian Cage Jay White finish. Seamless, perfect finish.
Well, the finish ended up fine. It's like everything that preceded it was. Yeah, that was just
it was an easy edit. Shivani brings out Hangman Page, and he is ready to take Jay White's head off. He mentions how he nearly ended Juice Robinson's life, and basically insinuated he gave Austin Gunn a concussion, and that's why he's not around. So Page is then jumped by Colton Gunn, and Page gets his belt out when Jay and Juice Robinson run out. Page flees away, and Jay states that he will always have his number. It says he's 4-0 in matches with Hangman Page. You can't measure up to me, and you have not seen the last of me, which, based on their pay-per-view match, I'm totally fine with these two not having seen the last of each other.
Sure. Yeah. I thought it was a little bit odd how they had a 2-on-1 advantage to trick Hangman to, I guess, to get the advantage for the baby faces. I don't know if that came across maybe the way that they had intended, because like by the end of it, I don't know if I was necessarily cheering for Jay White so much. White's promos.
This is a great promotion of like badass heels that you want to get behind.
I guess so. I think White's promos are clearly, like, they're fine. There's something about him that's clearly connecting with the audience. Doesn't really land for me, though. I don't know how you feel about them, John.
I think he's fine. I'm higher on Jay White than a lot of people are, but I do understand that it's, when you are looking at this plethora of performers that you're seeing getting, emphasis. I don't know if Jay White sells ticks off all the boxes for everyone, but I think he's very good in this role. I don't think he's necessarily the guy that separates himself from everyone else. I'm more looking at Hangman Page, that I really do worry about these people that have like these big elevations, these big moments, and coming out of the Swerve feud. Like, you don't want Hangman to just like slip into just a program that's not going anywhere. So I hope that there is a clear path for Hangman, who I think you could argue is one of the most well-rounded performers they have going and should be involved in significant stakes in the company. And he doesn't feel like he is at the moment. There was a Sammy Guevara feature, lots of features on this show, and talks about what he owes AEW because they've given him the life that he has. And we get, as always, the rule of thumb: if you are a childhood fan, take photos with wrestlers, because odds are they'll still be wrestling by the time you make it as a full-time wrestler. And here we had Sammy Guevara, young Sammy Guevara, with the gold standard Shelton Benjamin, and that would be our match tonight. And Benjamin and MVP state he's not here to make friends, he's here to crack heads, and they are the merchants of misery, and they're really good at hurting people. Mm-hmm. Maybe that'll be the name of the new group. Really good at hurting people.
I might make for a good catchphrase on the back of a T-shirt. Sure, yeah. Good video package. They're really, really continuing this push of Shelton Benjamin to make him feel like this much more serious, dominant threat, and he's already in 2 weeks felt more special than he has throughout his entire second WWE run.
Yes, the gigantic Shelton Benjamin against Sammy Guevara. I mean, this man just looks bigger and bigger every week just because of who they pair him with, and so he catches a tope suicida by Guevara, suplexes him on the ramp, and then Guevara fights back, hit some impressive stuff here, including a corkscrew dive, landed on his feet from a German attempt, and then Guevara does a pop-up into a cutter, and then he does his own Shelton Benjamin springboard, and now Shelton Benjamin, the teacher, has now he has ascended from pupil to teacher, and he lands the super kick on Sammy Guevara. I thought this should have been the finish, but he instead hits a second super kick, and then his pay dirt exploder suplex for the win in 10 minutes and 14 seconds.
Got his revenge on Texas with that one.
Yeah, almost 20 years later.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. This was a really great match 2 weeks in a row now for Shelton Benjamin. I never thought I'd be this excited about a 2024 Shelton Benjamin run as a single star. He certainly got the in-ring ability to pull this new monster character off. I also love just seeing him in a more sort of like stoic, cocky type of personality, whereas in the past, like, I think there were way too many attempts trying to make him, I don't know, boisterous or just like off the wall, kind of, quirky. He's way better just as like this serious ass kicker, and I think they've stumbled onto something very exciting here. I just really hope for Shelton he gets established enough in this very important time before he very likely loses to Swerve, and before he will definitely become second fiddle in the group next to Bobby Lashley.
So you have high hopes for where this build is going towards for him.
I don't know if they expected Shelton to, be this impressive looking. So I would figure out a really strong way to make Shelton still feel like a special attraction after next week's match with Swerve. I don't think it's the worst idea in the world to have him even beat Swerve. I don't think that I wouldn't completely write that off.
Do you think he's missing a motherly figure to oversee his career?
He's got MVP.
What about his actual mother?
Right. Yeah. That's kind of what I was speaking of. This is a much better Shelton than any of those iterations.
Renee is with Mariah May, and she throws the luggage down the hallway, and this is Anna Jay's luggage. We didn't quite know why Anna Jay had packed her luggage to come to this show other than for this. And she is, there's a pull apart by our one appearance by Christopher Daniels on this show. Your talent's outside ready to go January 6th here on the BCC. And Christopher Daniels is just hanging out here.
Well, aren't wrestlers always told to bring their gear?
I guess so. Yes.
You never know when you're going to be booked for Rampage.
Maybe she'll be on Rampage. Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher, we got their history. Of course, the pandemic, we had some Rev Pro footage, and that leads to Shivani bringing out Kyle Fletcher with Don Callis. And Fletcher mentions how Ospreay has a herniated disc that he's trying to keep quiet. Oops, just breaking a HIPAA law here. And fans are just as much to blame for this as Ospreay, because Fletcher was the next big thing. Then Ospreay arrived, and everyone said that he was going to be the next Will Ospreay, and that he looked like Will, he wrestled like Will. They even said I sounded like Will, and I took that as an insult because I'm better than Will in every way. And the crowd starts chanting, "Wrap it up." This was going kind of lengthy, and he explains that Don Callis has bought all the TV time he needs to explain, and he compares the way Ospreay was brought into New Japan by Okada and then stabbed him in the back. And then when Kenny Omega left, you could never fill Kenny Omega's shoes. So what did you do? You hit him with the exact same screwdriver I used on you and hit a Tiger Driver. So I'm simply doing what you taught me to do. I thought this was like a really good explanation of the turn. And he challenges Will to ignore doctor's orders and let him destroy his brittle neck, and wants to face him and says, "I can't be anything like you, Will." And Don Callis has a razor. And thankfully, this was a lot safer than the Father Jim Mitchell Raven shaving that immediately comes to mind whenever I see a razor on a live program. And Kyle Fletcher proceeds to shave his head.
Live TV, yeah. Didn't even do it for a match, but you know what?
Wouldn't that have been the direction to say, I don't want you to look like me, Will, so I'm going to challenge you and shave your head?
Could have, yeah, sure. Would have been something. I mean, for a guy to voluntarily do this himself on live TV, there's a certain, like, very cool quality to it rather than being forced to do it, right? So maybe it was simply that.
Do you think he's going to continue with this unfinished look?
I would say unlikely.
Yeah.
Yeah, unlikely. Yeah. Although, Minoru Suzuki kind of made it work for, a good amount of time. Yeah, this was an excellent promo from Kyle Fletcher. Really, really excellent.
I was liking it anyway. I know it did go long. I will give you that, but it ended.
I didn't think so. I mean, this
crowd was getting bored by it. They were vocalizing.
I just took that as heat because they didn't like him because they really like Will Ospreay. I thought this was like really, really strong, and I thought it was an appropriate length. I said last week, I don't know if I could wait a whole week, for Kyle Fletcher to be teasing the reason why he turned on Will Ospreay, because I thought it was pretty evident why he turned on Will Ospreay. I was wrong. There was clearly a lot more depth behind this turn than I think, I was anticipating. They gave us a lot more of a detailed and fleshed out explanation for the turn. So, I guess we learned from this that Don had planted in his mind that Will Ospreay was holding this guy back. I think the story and the motivation are strong, but more importantly, the delivery was even more important, and this guy nailed it. Great confidence, great delivery, great control of his voice, and that little sort of like chant from the crowd to tell him to wrap it up. I thought Fletcher handled it really well. He gave us a little bit of improv here by explaining how this guy next to me paid for all the airtime that I need to tell my story. So shut them down really well. So this felt to me like a big time money promo. If he cuts more of these consistently, like you're looking at somebody who could be a world champion within the next 2 years. So I'm sorry, but I don't think that tag team is reforming.
Is it possible that this Salt Lake City crowd was actually just misheard and they actually wanted him to rap it out, like air your grievances in rhyme?
Maybe.
Moving on. We got an upcoming events calendar, including matches. I mean, this is the most revelatory addition to AEW's programming, is promoting future dates and aggressively matchmaking for 1 to 2 weeks in advance.
Well, they're listening to feedback, obviously. So we'll see if it makes any difference.
Then they showed a highlight of Takeshita beating Josh Alexander at the Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling Show and Ricochet's appearance. So they did get that focus.
Yeah. So it's been a really healthy relationship already, hasn't it?
So weird.
Yeah, like they are. Well, for one thing, like they're using it to tell this Ricochet international title story of him hunting Takeshita down anywhere. For Takeshita, it's great that he actually gets to cross international borders and goes to other promotions to defend this championship. So it's good in that sense. But this is. So it's amazing for this new Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling promotion, because they're getting national airtime, being recognized now as an official affiliate of sorts with AEW. So incredible promotion for MLP just off of this one weekend.
So as long as this international title exists, there's a reason for them to send Takeshita to Scott D'Amore.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Renee interviews Ricochet, and Takeshita has never pinned him, but he screwed me twice to become champion. So he challenges Takeshita to show up at Rampage. Spoiler, I don't think Takeshita is facing Ricochet on Rampage.
Are you sure about that?
I'm not 100% sure because I haven't read the spoilers yet.
You didn't think Okada versus...
This was 1 week. They, coming off that number that they did on Friday, they didn't make one announcement for Rampage this Friday. I feel they realized, listen, we have X amount of shows to promote. We're not bothering throwing anything on Rampage. This show is cooked. Why throw anything on this show that is just not turning around?
I don't know if the results will be any different.
I wouldn't be shocked, Way, if by announcing nothing, it grows.
Sure,
that's how it's just the 2-hour show or 1 hour show that you're either going to watch or you're not going to watch, and I thought it was really noteworthy. Now, to be fair, they also didn't promote anything for Collision on Saturday. By the end of tonight, I don't think we knew one match for Saturday.
And do you think that'll make a big difference?
Well, I mean, I'm less likely to spend 2 hours watching out of, I wonder what these 2 hours are going to be versus give me something.
Right. I wonder. Maybe they just don't have anything great to announce.
This is an interesting strategy. What if we promote nothing?
Well, they've kind of tried that. We'll see. I will be covering the show this weekend.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Maybe they realize this is a Wai Ting free edition on, and they're going against Bound for Glory. So just throw in the towel. Anyway, so Ricochet is approached by MVP and Shelton Benjamin. They mentioned their tumultuous history. I think we pretty much had this segment verbatim in WWE, where the Hurt Business is trying to recruit Ricochet.
Well, like MVP says, this is a new promotion, fresh start.
Fresh
for everybody.
Start. Yeah.
All right.
Total fresh start.
Look at what he's done for Shelton. Okay, just by crossing promotional boundaries. I mean, he could very much do the same for Ricochet, I think.
Brian Cage and Lance Archer.
So just on this, they've given these postcards now to a lot of wrestlers. I believe like there's Ricochet and Max
They're
Caster.
business cards. I wish they were handing out postcards.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, wish you were here, having a great time by the beach. Yeah, they've handed them out to half the roster.
Yeah, Max Caster, Mercedes, Leo Rush, I believe. So, I mean, obviously, they haven't all worked out. It makes me wonder if any of them are going to be making the jump. It's not like they've teased Monet at all since the postcard, the business card was handed out. So is this just his way of introducing, and we're not necessarily supposed to look that deeply into it?
Or we're going to have, like, this is, again, like one of those issues. Let's wait for it to play out, of course. But, like, we're amassing yet another heel faction in a company that certainly doesn't need any more heel groups at the moment. Like, it's going to be very hard to have this unit wrecking shop at the same time of the BCC, save nothing of whatever the Elite is going in this direction.
I mean, sure, I can understand that, but it's just, I think they're trying to follow the New Japan model where everybody has a place so that they can work tags, they can, come out and join each other in segments and get screen time that way. Because we do have like this sort of overarching lead heel group, it might diminish the others, but I also don't think that's like, I also don't know if it should deter them from going this route.
Brian Cage and Lance Archer murdered the Pillars of Destiny. So Brian Cage and Lance Archer are the Skyscrapers, circa 1989. They just murdered these guys. They did their powerbomb chokeslam combo in a minute. I like these two together. I mean, maybe it's just it's a total throwback to 1989 WCW, where you had a division of like the Steiners, the Road Warriors, the Skyscrapers, the Samoan SWAT team, like just all these big teams throwing them around. And I think to have one big monster team, I'm fine with these two together, just destroying guys.
Yeah, I'm fine with it if they get pushed appropriately. I mean, we also have the Gates of Agony, who are very much a similar type of team. I mean, I'm sure there are other guys on this roster that you could pair that are big.
When was the last time we saw the Gates of Agony on an AEW show?
I think they cut a promo. Time. They cut a promo on Rampage or Collision or something. Like they're still called the Gates of Agony. Okay, they've lost their cage. They're back to like gating, I guess. So they're still around, but they're not being pushed. So that's all I'm saying is these guys need to be pushed consistently and not just like put there to, lose. Because I think at this point, like big men aren't that special anymore in really professional wrestling in general. Like there's a lot more appeal to just having like even a quick, average size pro wrestler than like large guys. So they more so need, I think, good pushes, maybe effective promos from Don Callis. So I hope for that for them.
Back outside, it's now dark, but these wrestlers, they are determined. They're not going to give up. This felt like a bunch of kids living on the same street, and they've all declared like, we're running away from home, and they all go and hang out at the park, and then Dad comes out and calls Kyle and Orange, kids, it's time for dinner. Oh, guys, I can't run away from home anymore. I got to go home for dinner. And Cassidy and Kyle were called because it's Mark Briscoe's match coming up next. And Chuck Taylor gives a pep talk to Orange Cassidy that they've known each other for 20 years, and it's time for him to step up.
Mm-hmm. Very good use of Chuck in this role. I believe this is the first time we've acknowledged that he has now taken this production role after, I guess, this unannounced retirement or forced retirement from that Trent match. And to use him in this, given all the history he has with Orange Cassidy, I thought was really good use.
So the ladder war follows between Mark Briscoe and Chris Jericho. Mark is wearing a shirt with his brother's image on it, and immediately Jericho gets knocked off the apron and goes through 2 tables on the floor. So they start off pretty hot. Jericho uses a ladder, busting open Mark in the face, and Mark then stops him from climbing, hits a DVD into a ladder in the corner, and then tips the ladder with Jericho underneath, followed with a senton. And the 2 fight on the ladder under the belt when Briscoe is knocked off but manages to tip the ladder over. And as Briscoe sets up Jericho on a table, Brian Keith runs out. He's followed by Rocky Romero, who attacks Brian with a kendo stick. And then Mark Briscoe has Jericho on the table. He climbs to the very top of this ladder, and he's getting his balance, and this looks frightening. He leaps off the ladder with the froggy bow and puts Jericho through this table. And Jericho, when he goes through this table, unfortunately, this ladder was positioned right next to them, and it looked like his head just bounced off this ladder. It looked brutal for Jericho. And I mean, thankfully, Mark came off the ladder okay, but my God, it was
as okay as you can. Fall off
like
the
you
ladder
could
that
see,
tall.
like he was getting his footing there. I mean, that could have gone worse.
I just mean the landing. I mean, a table isn't going to cushion that much, from a fall that high.
Yeah. So crazy spot here. And then Mark follows with the J Driller. And I think the Brian Keith run-in, everyone was almost waiting for Big Bill, who comes in, choke slams Mark to the floor through a pair of tables, and then lifts Jericho on his shoulders to grab the belt at 15 minutes and 44 seconds as Jericho wins with the big assist from Big Bill.
The Nueve.
Yeah. You're
Yes.
9-time champion, and I guess the question is Chris Jericho and Mark Briscoe too big for an ROH pay-per-view in December? Will they just utilize a rematch for AEW purposes?
I don't think I need a rematch.
They're definitely going to do a third match. They're 1-1 now.
Mark
getting screwed. Mark's going to have to go through Brian Keith and Big Bill to get to Jericho. We're going to do the exact same thing that MJF is putting the hoops in front of Adam Cole.
I don't think any wrestler needs to stay in the Jericho-verse for more than 2 matches maximum. That's it, okay? You don't need to do the rest. Like, I'm ready to see Mark Briscoe move on from even Ring of Honor to, like, AEW proper, going for a proper AEW championship. Let Jericho have his run so that he could pass it off to somebody, like, who could maybe use this sort of, like, promotion as, like, the head of a Ring of Honor, for instance. I don't really want to see Mark Briscoe rematch him. And I don't even care to see Mark Briscoe win this title back, honestly.
Well, we do know what at least is going to be in the near future for Chris Jericho. That is Tomohiro Ishii, who was last seen on AEW getting laid out by the Learning Tree. And he made his return with Rocky Romero, and he just walked out, stared at Jericho, and this man traveled a lot of miles to come out and look at Chris Jericho from afar here in Salt Lake City, Utah.
I mean, I'm hoping he got paid for it.
I'm sure he got paid for this appearance, but this was
okay.
It's like, what is your game plan? Well, if he wins this match, which I hope he does, I'm going to be ready with my music.
I mean, I guess he was there anyway. He is part of the conglomeration, is he not?
Well, we haven't seen him for like 2 months.
Well, he's like
he disappeared after he
satellite member.
He was just at Crystal Palace on Monday, teaming with Tanahashi.
Okay, well, I guess my question is, why didn't this guy come out sooner so that he could have helped Mark Briscoe against Big Bill? This guy waited till after the match to come out.
Well, he doesn't have a pathway to get a match with Mark Briscoe.
He wanted Mark Briscoe, his friend and stablemate, to lose so that he could challenge Jericho afterwards. All right.
I mean, he's like, I've got the grudge with the new champion, so this works out wonderful for me.
Okay, all right. Yeah, Ishii versus Jericho. I'm not that excited for it, man.
Maybe that's Final Battle.
It could be. When is Final Battle?
December.
It's pretty far away. I don't think that's happening then. Yeah, I mean, anytime at this point, like anytime like an Ishii or a Suzuki appear, you kind of know what the deal is. They're just there as like a occasional special attraction, very likely to lose their matches that they're going to be in. It'll be a title defense for Jericho.
Those two had, like 2 years ago when Jericho was on that crazy hot streak, like him and Ishii had an unbelievable match on TV like 2 years ago. That was the chop battle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they have to live up to. Kamille and Chris Statlander, we got a nice training video for both of them. They will have their match on the Fright Night show next Wednesday. Adam Cole comes out, and he's immediately interrupted by the Undisputed Kingdom. Roderick Strong says that Cole was used by MJF, and he never checked on you while you were out. We always checked up on you. And basically, they want to work together to take down Max. And Cole kind of agrees to this. He's like, let's finish MJF tonight. And MJF is on the screen getting a massage. And he repeats that, Cole, you will never get your hands on me. And just like that, he says, well, whichever one of you wins 3 matches in a row can face me at Full Gear. What happened to Never? His arm wasn't twisted. He wasn't like forced into this ultimatum. He was just like, you're never getting your revenge on me unless you happen to win 3 matches in a row. And so it's Adam Cole and Roderick Strong want the match with MJF. And whoever can win 3 matches fast enough gets the
3
match.
matches straight. Whoever wins 3 matches straight. Yeah. So I mean, MJF said something to the effect of like, this is like his olive branch this is him dangling the carrot. So he's just effectively, I guess, playing with them, toying with them.
The one thing that you can do is that both of them get their 2 wins, and then Max gets to make the last match, and it's Cole against Roderick Strong. That's the last match.
Okay. Yeah.
Because this week, Cole and Roderick are best friends.
Yes, they are. Yeah. I mean, as I think they were, there's never been a reason for Adam Cole to turn on Roderick Strong yet. We're still carrying on from that. They're still best of friends. And I think the turn is coming via this journey that Max has set them on.
So this is probably Cole and MJF at Full Gear.
Cole versus MJF at Full Gear is possible. Because Cole, can they do Cole
it is not going
versus
to be
Strong? Sorry, Cole versus Strong at Full Gear is possible as well.
I think that's going to be your TV match.
So they need at least 3 weeks. When is Full Gear?
A month.
A month from now. Okay.
Yeah.
It's possible.
You have 2 shows a week. You can definitely get through all these matches.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see.
Penelope Ford and Jamie Hayter, which included the line on Collision from Penelope Ford. And you want to talk about backstabbing bitches? Well, you're the backstabbing bitch. Thought maybe this was Vince Russo. This was like Impact 2008. Renee is with Jamie Hayter, calls it BS that Ford says she hasn't worked for this, and talks about her battle to make it to AEW, and says she is here looking for a fight. Ford is nowhere to be found, so I'm going to make you the victim of my return in 2 weeks on November the 6th. Mm-hmm. So, again, we are just loading up these shows for the next couple of weeks. I don't know if these will be matches that necessarily make a big difference, but this will be on that head-to-head night.
Right, yeah. Whether or not they're necessarily going to make a difference, I think it's great that we're getting what feels like
I like the fact they were laying out all this stuff for weeks to come. Yeah. I thought it's like, you should be doing this.
Gives us time to anticipate it, gives them a chance to build the story and cut these sort of promos. And on that note, I don't know why we haven't heard Jamie Hayter speak more consistently until this feud, she's a very good talker. And the fact that she didn't cut a big promo coming off of that Wembley return is, I think, such a big loss of momentum that feels like they're in a rebuilding phase for her again, trying to get her back up to a world title contender level. But I don't know why they fumbled that so much.
House of Black against Kevin Koa, Jaden Monroe, and your favorite, Pirata de la Muerte.
What does that mean?
Pirate of the Dead.
I
think. So
cool. What a cool name.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw his facial expression, if it screams Pirata de la Muerte, but these guys got killed. It went a little longer than our last squash match. In fact, this one went 2 minutes. The earlier one went 1. So Monroe is tagged in. They triple teamed him. Ended up with a pop-up into a powerbomb by Brody, curb stomp by Buddy Matthews. Matthews wins, and he makes the challenge to Adam Cole. So Cole backstage confronts Buddy Matthews, says, "You got a problem with me?" And Matthews says, "I'm going to prove a point." "Yeah, what's that?" "That you're fragile."
I mean, you said it way better than I think they actually did. I like yours more.
Yeah, well, it's Buddy Matthews against the Blue Man Group next week.
I find the story interesting, or at least what Buddy Matthews is using against Cole interesting. I mean, I'm getting the sense they're trying to tell some sort of story of Cole having some sort of internal confidence issue due to his string of injuries, and whether or not his body is able to hold up. So whether or not that story continues beyond the Buddy Matthews match, we'll see. But I think it should. I think it's a great little storyline for Cole.
Next was Kamille with Mercedes Moné in her corner against Queen Aminata. And Moné slaps her from the floor behind the referee's back. Aminata then ducks a spin kick as Kamille just kind of crashes down. And Aminata hit her with a sliding elbow, the sliding kick into the ropes, and then a powerbomb is countered by Aminata, rolling her into a cover, and then lifted for a torture rack, which is turned into a blue thunderbomb. And Moné yells, "Finish her!" And Kamille goes for her finish, which is kind of like an inverted roll of the dice. But the way Aminata went down, this was kind of just like your Scorpion Death Drop, and pins Aminata. And I thought Aminata continues to I thought she looked very good in this. It was short, and I don't know, with Kamille, It is like they're putting her in these matches where she's not positioned as like this monster that's just running through people, but there's also, I think, the understanding that there are some limitations to that you want to put her in matches that you can get some time out of, rather than just making her in there to be your next Lance Archer.
Yeah, they did that in this match, and I think it made Kamille look bad. I thought this match kind of exposed Kamille. I was not very impressed with her coming out of this. I thought she looked pretty uncoordinated in several parts. I actually thought Queen Aminata totally outworked her. And I would even wonder if Aminata was a bad matchup for Kamille. You know, she, for one thing, is just as tall as Kamille, so you don't get that intimidating factor that I think you want to have with somebody like a Kamille. You take the size advantage away, not to mention all of those awful looking Ranas and head scissors where Aminata nearly spiked herself on her head several times. I also think you needed a lot more powerhouse moves from Kamille ahead of this Statlander match that they're trying to build between two powerhouses. Mm-hmm. Didn't get enough of that. I just didn't think it was a good matchup to make for Kamille.
Yeah, I just she is supposed to be this sort of monster, and I think they just don't want to be putting her in those scenarios. I think it's similar to with where they were with the prototype should have been Jade Cargill for them as well. And you kind of had this argument of, well, Jade needs to be in longer matches. I think they're in the same boat with Kamille.
You can have longer matches, but I think they need to be the right opponents.
Yeah, well, this, I was with you. I didn't think Kamille stood out, and this was to set her up for the big match next week. And I came away with this, that to me, for the second week in a row, it was Queen Aminata that to me is the one that is looking the superior.
Yeah. So
Statlander walks down for a stare down, and Moné is just your heel manager, just getting in the way here, and then drills Statlander, who no-sells it, and then gets caught from behind by Kamille, who hit her finisher better than she hit it on Aminata. She at least rotated her on this one.
Yeah, the other one rotated too, but the angle didn't look great. I don't think it's a great looking finisher, and it's not as awkward as the Moné maker, but I don't think it's a great one either. Man, they fucked this Statlander. They turned up so badly now.
What are you talking about?
It's been so awful, and now they've kind of simplified it by just billing her as a powerhouse,
born again Christian.
Oh, she's so far from where she should be after that excellent street fight with Willow. Remember all the great buzz coming off of like, wow, I can't believe these two followed, Pac versus Osprey. That's completely gone, and they're starting from zero.
We did get that great angle with Stokely turning on her. That was pretty good.
Yeah, it might have been on Twitter. It might have been on via tweet. Yeah, totally screwed her up, and I'm expecting her to lose this one. Although, actually, she might be winning it actually to go into face Monet, but she does not feel like a hot character at all.
The guys are still outside. I'm sorry. I just thought these guys. Every successive segment, I thought they looked.
They're playing defense. They're standing on guard, defending.
They did a great job, didn't they?
Well, clearly not. They were outsmarted. Yeah.
The guys are. So a vehicle pulls up, and it's the Patriarchy, and Christian spots Kip Sabian. So the Patriarchy chase after Kip, and Hook shows up backstage, and Renee asks, "Who's the attacker?" And he says, the scum in the ring, as the Patriarchy have made their way out there. So out comes Hook. He destroys Nick Wayne, then goes after Christian, but gets saved when Kip low blows Hook. And Cage says to Kip, I know why you're doing what you are. I'll deal with you later. And Kip obeys, goes to the corner, and they proceed to destroy Hook further. He tries to fight back after a Wayne's World and gets put down from that, and then a kill switch onto the contract case. And then Christian leans in. Listen to me, Tyler. This isn't what you think it is. It's not what it seems. Tyler.
Tyler, okay. I didn't even know that was his real name. Interesting.
Yeah, he wasn't born Hook.
Well, I would have no idea.
We're shooting, bro. It's real name.
He's the son of a guy named Taz.
Hey, Jay, I'm calling you out tonight, Jay. Yeah. I don't want to face Christian. I want to face Jay.
Right, yes. So Tyler
versus Jay at the pay-per-view.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. Listen, I'm happy that we have some resolution for this Kip Sabian thing that's been endless. Okay,
they made it very clear. There was video proof of this. Christian Cage was definitely the attacker. They told you, there was no ambiguity.
Yeah, and Kip Sabian, running around all the time. He now has a new father in Christian Cage. So congratulations to them. Makes me wonder if this was always the plan. If Killswitch wasn't injured, but. Whatever, it's this is where we are. Hook versus Christian coming up.
Listen, Kip, don't you ever interrupt the first spear. It's
Hold
always
on.
the second
is Kip his real name?
I don't think it is. No one.
Simon James Kippen. Simon. Listen, Simon. Okay.
Sorry, Simon Kippen is his name.
Kippen is the last name. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And you're changing it to Kip Sabian. I would have gone with Simon Kippen. If you could get over with the name Simon Kippen, you could do anything.
I don't know if he could have.
That's Simon Kippen.
I don't know if he could have. If he's getting over as Kip Sabian.
Maybe Christian will refer to him as his under his government name next week. The Young Bucks and Jack Perry against Daniel Garcia and Private Party. You wouldn't believe where the baby faces are still outside. They needed torches or something. It was getting really dark outside. Nick hits a swanton as they hit a simultaneous draping DDT to Garcia on the floor. Neckbreaker combo comes to Garcia, and then Zay is tossed into the barricade. Stokely is giving tips to Private Party unsolicited from the front row. This guy's also flying himself town to town and getting these seats. Nick misses a PK, kicking his brother, and then Zay fights back, tagging Quen. This is after 5 minutes of selling by Brother Zay. Quen fires up, and he tags Zay back within 30 seconds, so he's back in. The Bucks super kick both. Poison Rana by Perry. And then Perry is sent over the barricade when Garcia returns, and the Private Party tries the silly string onto Matt when Zay turns it into an inside cradle, catching Matt Jackson for the pin, and the third time Private Party have pinned the Young Bucks. And Brother Zay states, we've got your number. We want a rematch. The Bucks aren't interested, so Zay offers, if you can beat us, me and Mark will never team again. And Mark Quen did not get the memo ahead of time. He's like, wait a minute, let's roll back a little. And the Bucks agree, and this is happening next Wednesday.
Right. So that's what Zay meant last week. Mystery solved. He's saying, oh, okay, if what Stokely is suggesting is what it takes, then that's what it takes. We will offer to break up in order to get our title shot. So yeah, I mean, makes sense. I like it. Whether or not they actually break up, I'm very curious to know. I could see it going either way. So good match. Kept the focus on Private Party here as they made him look pretty strong ahead of this next title challenge.
But then we go to the main event, and I'm just going to quote Tony Schiavone. It's a truck! And a truck pulls up containing Marina Shafir all alone. And then it's all a plot because Yuta and Claudio are in the arena and they jump Garcia and Private Party. I couldn't believe this. They lay them out with chairs, these baby faces, just total goofs running back into the arena. And there's Jon Moxley, all in black, dragging Chuck Taylor out. So they explain Moxley's been here all night long as the others are disposed or taken care of. Claudio places a chair. First, they put the chair around Chuck's ankle, which we all know is the damaged body part. But then they take it off and go for the neck instead. They spared him.
No. The neck is death, John.
Everyone comes back from these.
You don't die from a broken ankle, okay? Like a broken ankle, yeah, it would have been pretty bad. But Claudio said, no, we need to paralyze this man so that he doesn't walk.
Evil does this to everyone's neck every show. Puts
Not
a chair
like
around the
this.
neck and swings.
Yeah, this was worse, okay? This is permanent.
Well, I think Chuck Taylor and Paul Ellering had similar fates this week. And, the man was compromised and destroyed as the stomp is made by Claudio. And then the locker room comes out, including a seething Orange Cassidy, who suddenly is coming to grips with his own mortality. And he's just hearing those words. It's time to step up. And that was the end. This was like Dawson's dad dying in season 3.
I never watched the show.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It was a sad ending. It was telegraphed, but a good ending here. And Excalibur always leaving us with that one sentence to think about all week long. This is not what professional wrestling is all about. It's like, this is exactly what professional wrestling is all about. This is great.
Well, it's also about syringes and, I don't know, burning people's homes down.
The line was crossed with a chair to a man's neck. That's too much. And the show ends. And, I seem to see like this was a very polarizing episode of Dynamite.
Let's talk about the angle.
I like
the
this
angle. Was
angle.
polarizing?
I think overall, the overall episode.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just talk about the angle first. I thought this angle was great. Okay, like maybe at this point, like I see somebody like in the chat room complaining about it being repetitive. It needs to be repetitive. Okay, we're still establishing the heel thread. We're trying to build the heels up so big that this guy Orange Cassidy finally will become the leader that he's supposed to be. And I think they're doing a great job of telling that story.
I thought Orange was great.
Listen, Orange Cassidy has not said more than like 5 words in all of this, and he has now become somehow the most interesting character in all of this. They're doing such a great job with these close-up shots and like these sort of like the Chuck Taylor usage on this episode was fantastic. It's excellent focus on making this guy feeling like he has to overcome something that's within him that's kind of made him who he is, and he has to evolve into the next version of who Orange Cassidy should be, which is a leader. So I thought that was great. The BCC just continued to like be just this excellent device that makes me feel like something important is happening in the show, and it's a great way of elevating certain baby faces. Now you have guys like that, like the Dark Order that are just kind of there to like fill to make space. But the focus is on Daniel Garcia. It's on Orange Cassidy. It's going to be on a hook, to really be the guys to take the next step. And I thought that they're doing a great job with Orange Cassidy right now.
Yeah, they're in if this was they feel like the Toronto Blue Jays that we're watching, that are very much trying to rebuild at the moment. But I feel I watch this show and I'm seeing them very much try to address a lot of these problems, and they're not going to be quick. Like, none of this feels like these are going to be quick fixes.
This doesn't feel like it's a quick fix type of storyline. It feels like they're taking their time building the
I'm not
BCC.
even talking about just the storyline itself. Like, I'm just talking about, like, everything. Like, the way they are trying, I think, to advertise a lot more and build up stories and
they don't have to worry about that right now. They're set. So do your long-term build. I mean, yes, you should worry to some extent, but it's not the urgency that I think it was for the past year.
They're not hot-shotting stuff. I think it's just it's the understanding of trying to just book 2 weeks ahead of knowing where you're going. And I think also like a heavier, like remember when Dynamite was starting, like they just seemed to be so hesitant to do video packages because of the concern that this was going to
affect the minute by minute.
Yeah, especially when you were running up head to head with a wrestling program. And now it's like there's a propensity of them, and that's what a lot of people were calling for. Is like they're trying a lot of stuff to change things, and I think that's very evident. For this show in particular, I really like the closing angle. I thought it put Orange Cassidy where you want to be. Darby still kind of, I think it kind of helps like that you have Darby kind of like off to the sidelines while you're doing this kind of focus on Orange Cassidy at the moment too.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, he's off, I guess, selling the effects of like, the disappointment from losing Bryan Danielson. He's probably not going to be figured into a proper match for the next pay-per-view, but why not use that time to give focus to an Orange Cassidy and have Darby come back for the pay-per-view, for instance, and you can tell the Darby story. Take your time with these chapters, right? So yeah, I think the major angle was done well here. The other big story coming out of this, I guess, is Chris Jericho winning the ROH Championship. So I hope to see Mark Briscoe springboard from this into another feud that will be an elevation for him. What else did we have here? Shelton and MVP, I think that continues to be very impressively, built, like for Shelton's case. So next week, I hope to be a really great match with him and Swerve. Kyle Fletcher cut an excellent promo on this show.
Yeah, that was a good segment. Women's match, not so much.
No.
And then you had the squash matches, which were just sort of there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there you have it. That was Dynamite. And as of now, we don't have anything for Collision on Saturday or Rampage, although people can probably read spoilers by now.
They did
Rampage.
like set up a few matches for next week. We got
for next week they have next week has been a pretty well built up show, mainly with Swerve and Shelton.
Kamille versus Statlander,
and the Bucks and Private Party.
And Matthews versus Cole.
Yeah, that's a very stacked show for.
And at this point, it's like that's more important. It's more important to build Dynamite. I think it's pretty important to build Collision too. But man.
What do you think the strategy is going to be for 2 weeks from now on the head-to-head night? Like, is that one that they are like? Is that
they
one
should have Lashley? I think you should really like steer the audience towards like that. This is going to be a big show that'll be worth watching. You should tune in because important things are going to happen. Yeah, they should make it a big one. Certainly not throw the towel in. They're in a position now where they have to defend their home territory.
Well, that's more so my question is like, do you throw everything at that to make sure you win that night, or like if you have your plans in place, like are you? Like certainly like there is, it's NXT that is at the disadvantage of being on the different night of the week, but like that is going to be one that is,
I think you make your best effort. Obviously I don't think that means like giving away your biggest matches that you should be saving for pay-per-view, but I think you should like deliver a higher than average, edition of Dynamite.
Like Title Tuesday wasn't. It was sort of just like, yeah, you had potentially Danielson's last match, but it was really not built up for a competitive head-to-head battle, and the numbers bore that out. All right, let's go to some feedback and super chats if you have any, as we will pull up some feedback here.
Yeah, let's go to our super chat here from Kevin Anderson, who sends $10. Thank you, Kevin, for that support. He says, I attended Dynamite tonight. By far, my highlight was seeing Mark Briscoe performing. Man goes hard as hell at 39 and bled buckets. The suburban SLC
Salt
crowd.
Lake City.
Yeah, bled buckets on the suburban Salt Lake City crowd. Is that what he means?
Okay, well, that's a memento to
quite
take
a souvenir.
Home with you.
All right.
Of, Mark Briscoe's
plasma. Well, doesn't high elevation affect blood flow in some way?
I don't know. Did it affect Mark Briscoe tonight?
I'm not sure.
He got it flowing. It was a very good match. I enjoyed the latter match.
Very good match, yeah.
Okay, next up, let's head on over to Andrew from Cape Breton. Good edition of the show tonight. I like Kyle Fletcher's promo, despite it going a bit long. I liked him shaving off a bunch of his hair as he ended up with the best haircut he's ever had. I don't know how Mark Davis comes back. Speaking of not knowing how someone can come back after a partner kills it on his own, Shelton Benjamin is the best he's ever looked. I don't really see the point of Bobby Lashley. Lashley's fine, but Shelton will end up having better matches. I thought the BCC angle was good at the end, but I think the commentators should have put more emphasis on the fact that Chuck trained Wheeler Yuta. Overall, I like the show tonight, but I do wish we got some collision matches after them starting to announce more in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, there's also the argument of you promote everything and like, what is the priority? And the priority is next Wednesday's Dynamite. And maybe like, and granted, there's a happy medium. I think you could have announced like your main event for Collision. I don't know. I can't get into their headspace, but there is also that balance that you throw so much at people and they're not going to retain all of this, and they put all their eggs into next Wednesday's basket.
They have a lot of shows to promote.
They have a ton of shows to promote. Like, I can't imagine them having to stack another show to their weekly schedule.
God.
Like,
I really think they should visit the idea of a brand split at that point, you know? Like, it's you can't spare airtime to tell stories for every single. Oh man, like 5 hours of TV. I think that just becomes too much, and everything suffers as a result. You know, with Shelton and Lashley, I kind of like like I said, I do have those concerns that Shelton would get lost in the shuffle once Lashley is there. Again, I hope in these few weeks they'll be able to elevate Shelton to a level where we might see him as not necessarily an equal to Lashley, but somebody who's just a notch below. And then you might have a team, for instance, of two monsters that you could promote as part of this, you know, new Hurt business. But that's a big if, because, you know, I would say Shelton still needs a lot of rehabbing, you know, after like decades of like mismanagement, I would say. All right, let's go to Jake from the Windy City. Unfortunately, I thought Dynamite was really bad tonight. Things are just very off for me, and definitely has been for the past few weeks, outside of a pretty good Benjamin Guevara match and a decent Fletcher promo. I just find that so many of these stories every week feel the same, with no evolving progression. Lots of evil heel stables or groups running roughshod at the same time. It doesn't make for a captivating product. I'm disappointed at how minor the BCC narrative feels. And the babyfaces just waiting outside the parking lot look like absolute fools for falling into Mox and BCC's antics. Nothing else harms a product more than dumb baby faces. AEW needs to address these underlying issues of formatting their creative presentation. You can't have a great product just depending on the quality of your pay-per-views. Yeah. Apparently a popular sentiment. Yeah, many people feeling the same way as Jake from what you were telling me, John.
I mean, there's, you know, that's some that, you know, I won't gauge on tonight. I would think generally it's I think Dynamite is a pretty satisfying show for most people each week, but you know, again, they're in a position where they are aggressively trying to build up like your next rung of stars, and there is going to be those like growing pains. Like the creative is there's some that hit, and there's stuff that's missing. Like their creative is hardly flawless.
Yeah, I thought tonight was a hit, man. Like I get like some baby faces were made to look stupid, but like we're largely talking about, I don't know, Jeff Jarrett and the Dark Order and like, you know, other members of the whatever, like these undercard guys. I think that they could look stupid. Like the Avengers look stupid at the end of Infinity War. Maybe some would say sure, but like they kind of, I guess what the difference is, you need to show that the baby faces are willing to fight their heart out. And again, this is just one episode of TV. I think you're going to get that. You're getting that in the form of Daniel Garcia. He's like showing that he's fighting his heart out. You're going to get that from Orange Cassidy. Again, we're still in the period now where we are heating up the feud and making Orange Cassidy break out of his shell. And it needed an event like tonight. So
Cody from Maine, while the Jericho title win doesn't move the needle for me, I at least applaud his efforts in a match type like this at his age. Aside from that, I thought the show was fantastic. It won't go down as the best Dynamite of the year, but I thought the structure was excellent. I feel like you got everything the people have been asking for in terms of a focused show. Hyping up upcoming events and establishing matches to look forward to, video packages to explain why this Guevara-Benjamin match has more meaning, giving Kyle Fletcher time to share, to shine, and the long storyline of the locker room's attempted strike back at the BCC. Two sides of the same coin, perhaps, that a person could view the faces as being dumb for waiting around, while the others, in my viewpoint, is that it puts over this heel entity as being smart and certainly more well-organized than the locker room overall.
They have leadership, which the babyfaces don't. Yes.
Question after reading Andrew's take about Lashley not necessarily being needed from an in-ring perspective. While it might not go over well, would it make sense to use this new faction as a vehicle for someone homegrown like Powerhouse Hobbs as opposed to Bobby Lashley?
Well, it's kind of a moot point at this point, right? Like, from all reports are that Lashley's already signed, so he's coming in. Yeah. I hope for a big role for Hobbs. Yeah, maybe around this. Could he join the stable? Should he join the stable? Would that be too much? I'm not sure. Maybe he can oppose Lashley.
Maybe this will be the biggest group in wrestling history. Bigger than the NWO at its peak.
Like, big as in size or big as in
numbers?
Oh, numbers, people. Yeah, sure.
Maybe they'll get their own show.
Just the whole. Yeah. Okay.
The Hurt Show.
The Hurt Show. You could do better than that. Come on. Matthew England, just a simple line of feedback tonight. It's increasingly hard to be a pro wrestling fan in good conscience when you continuously read lawsuits full of depravity. Looking forward to the Thursday edition of Pollock and Thurston tomorrow. Thanks for all the great work. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough hearing all this stuff. But how does it make you feel to know that, like, a lot of the wrestling that colored our childhood behind the scenes had all this shit going on, you know? Doesn't feel great, but it's better to know about it than not.
Yeah, I think we've seen a generation of trying to run from controversy or cover up controversy, and the consequences of that. I will always argue for this stuff being out in the open, that hopefully you have a generation that learns from this, and it's not to paint, like, listen, like, a character like a Mel Phillips is like really in a class of his own. Like, this was a monster that you're not going to see, hopefully you will never see repeated in this industry. Brian in New Jersey. I'm liking Moxley's crew portrayed as a major threat. I'm not liking the babyface frontline being made to look this dumb. Short but impactful performance by Orange Cassidy at the end of the show, and I think Kyle Fletcher's star is on the rise. I thought Briscoe and Jericho had a heck of a match with a bummer finish, and Briscoe sadly felt like an afterthought once Ishii came out. I'm sure he's not going to be an afterthought. I think he's one of the more standout babyfaces that has come to prominence in AEW. I'm not concerned at all about Mark Briscoe. I think he's one of the best acts that they have going.
Yeah, the fact that he has made a name for being a compelling promo, and the fact that he gets consistent airtime gives me a lot of faith that he will be at an elevated spot even coming off of this ROH title run.
Okay. Well, we've gone late, everyone, so thanks to everyone for joining us. Again, a big thank you to David Bixenspan for stopping by to talk about this lawsuit that was filed today. Again, you can read about it at rollingstone.com, and Brandon Thurston has a story up on our site. Again, I'll be back with Brandon Thursday, noon Eastern, for a special Thursday edition of Pollock and Thurston. Lee Cole will be joining us. Maybe another guest, we will see, but we will be going through the lawsuit and maybe taking questions as well. So that's coming up on Thursday. And what else is coming up?
I also wanted to promote, so some of you guys may have already, in the Post Wrestling Cafe, listened to Karen Peterson and JP's great Queen of Villains review. Those of you who have chosen to watch the show on Netflix, or maybe even haven't, but just wanted to listen to it, we're going to put that episode out for free on the free feed on Thursday evening / Friday morning. So those of you who want to head into the weekend looking for something to watch, Queen of Villains is out there, and it's getting very good reviews. Listen to this podcast from Karen and JP as they talk a lot about the background of the show.
And also on the cafe, Friday night we'll be live with SmackDown. And then on Saturday night, there's a free edition of Collision Course with Wai Ting and Kate from Montreal. Sunday morning, Sino and I will do a review on the cafe of TNA's Bound for Glory. So that is coming up this weekend. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And that concludes the show. Goodbye.